Okay, well, we'd like to welcome you to our city council meeting at 7. That clock's fast. It's really 7:01, 7:01. Okay, we'll have an invocation from Councilman Chris Sorensen and a pledge by Jason Miller. So,
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful tonight to assemble as a city council and city employees and members of our community to discuss a few of the needs and concerns of our city. Pray that thou protect us and guide us, help us to always make decisions that are in the overall best interests of our city and its future and the citizens that live here. We give thee thanks for what we have and for this beautiful place we live, and we pray that we can do our best to maintain that and to even make it better. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
We invite you to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
okay, I need approval for the meeting's agenda as presented and posted.
Make a motion to approve the meeting's agenda as written.
Okay, have
I'll second.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, wonderful. If you would like to speak or address the city council, you're welcome to do that. We have papers that are back on the counter in the back, and if you'd get those up to Kim, she'll be more than happy to get that. We do that so that we can get your name properly and your address in the record. So if you want to be in a record that's forever, this is the way to do it. So we just encourage you to do that. Now, do we have students here? Great. My goodness.
It's my fight song.
I was gonna say, over here is
Liz is going to the movies and I'm dancing.
This is my fight song.
It's just amazing how fast you can lose control of a meeting, isn't it? Okay, so we have a young man here, and we like to welcome you here. We appreciate you being here. And we do something that we started. If you would like to come up, you don't have to, but you're welcome to come up and sit with us if you want to. Have you heard about this? Ah, there you go. Would you like to come up? Okay, great. Come on up. We'll put a chair up here for you. So, and you can sit anywhere you'd like to. So you betcha. Come right on up. Oh, we got an extra chair right there. Yep.
Soft one.
Here, if you want to be right in the thick of us. Do you want to be in the middle? Do you want to go sit right there? Okay, I've got some good treats. If he has any better treats, you can
good.
treat yours before you decide.
I was just pitching it pretty hard.
There we go.
Oh, here's this one.
Well, we appreciate those who do come and enjoy participating in the government. So, is there anybody who would like to make a public comment to the city council? Okay, sounds good. We'll move to the consent agenda. Any questions on the consent agenda at all? Okay, I'll entertain a motion then for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as written.
Great, and this is a roll call vote. Jason?
Ye-
Oh, sorry.
Second,
We do need a
yes.
second. Thank you. Jason?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, Josh, we'd like to consider a resolution for the adoption of the downtown plan.
Thank you. I'm excited. I feel like I'm just saying that every time. This is really neat to be up here. As far as I know, aside from many years ago putting up some really stylish metal awnings on a bunch of buildings, we haven't had a real unified plan for our downtown and for our Main Street corridor. It seems like since then, I mean, for decades, at least what I've heard from all of you, is that it's been a combination of civic investments, opportune fires, and other private endeavors that have really left us with the downtown we have now. But now we're looking at adopting a plan that will really provide solid guidance for 12 blocks of our main street on either side, and communicate to our citizens, to the development community, and people that visit here what Springville downtown's really all about. Now, we spent a long time in work session going over the plan in detail. I have here, and I'm going to hand it to Kim, the actual final canonized copy of the plan with some with some wordsmithing and some measurements finalized on the street section. That is the final draft of the plan. It doesn't differ in any substantive way from what you've seen. It just had some clarifications and incorporated Public Works comments on the street sections. So having spent the time that we did to go through the plan, I have a presentation and I have the PDF of the plan, but I would just ask each of you if there's anything specifically that you'd like to discuss, any concerns that you've come upon as you've been reviewing the plan since we last met, and perhaps start from there instead of walking you through the entirety of the plan again.
Okay, questions for Josh? Chris?
Well, I don't even care if you discuss it. I just always want to be on record that I've never been comfortable with the parking amount. I don't think I'm going to change that or anything. But I've always felt like, and I feel like in the future, we're creating a disadvantage for the businesses on Main Street by not considering a parking structure or something like that. We're to this point, and I mentioned that enough that I know that's not going to change. But on record, I want to know that I can defend myself 10 years from now when there's no place to park, that I said I didn't think we had enough place to park. If that's okay to say that, that's how I feel, and
No, absolutely.
doing it for myself because I don't think we're leaving enough places to park on Main Street.
That's why I wanted to just flip to this fourth recommendation in the two not through area, that we need to do all of the studying that you're talking about, which may tell us that we need to build a parking structure or that we need to do all those elements. That's number 4 is a big rabbit hole that it tells us we need to go dive down to answer your questions.
Okay. I'm glad that there's the options there, so that's good.
Other questions for Josh? I have one. Oh, did you have one?
No.
While they're thinking of any questions they have, my original question that I had to you had to do with plan of action.
Yes.
And you supplied us with a
1,000-day plan.
1,000-day plan. I was going to say 1,000-year plan, maybe. A 1,000-day plan to where it doesn't do us any good to do these studies and these initiatives and not have really a good plan of action. And how comfortable do you feel? Because I've read through it. How good do you feel about the ability to be able to accomplish what you're trying to do? So
it's ambitious. It's also not an adopted part of the plan, so it's something that we will come back to you with on a regular basis as we do capital plans and budgets, and that we'll have on our wall and that we check in on regularly. And if we need to adjust or move stuff up or down, that's very easy because it's a separate document from the plan. But it's a deliverable that gives us the path forward. But I think we'd be very lucky to accomplish all of the initiatives on that list in the 1,000 days. But I don't feel that it's counterproductive to have that list as loaded as it is, because it really assigns tasks across the whole organization, and it will really help us get moving.
Well, and some of that depends on what property owners opt to do, right? As they adapt and
None of the 1,000-day plan
Yeah,
depends on other actors.
but it would speed it up or slow it down. depending on
it
what
could,
actors are doing.
yes.
Because I mean, if somebody decided to tear half of Main Street down and build something different, this plan allows for it in a way. Not half, but you know what I'm talking about. If well, it's not Hoagie Yogi anymore, but if that went away, I like that we're giving options for something that actually may pencil there.
Yeah, and the first thing we'd probably do is, make the tweaks to the Main Street South Gateway zoning and make that zone change.
Yeah.
That's an important one.
Yep.
Okay, other questions? Comfortable with what's been presented, Liz?
Yeah, I like it.
All right, sounds good. I'll entertain a motion then for approval of the resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2023-34, adopting the reframing downtown Springville's Main Street corridor study.
Okay, I have a motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, it's a roll call vote. Mr. Snelson?
Yes.
Ms. Crandall?
Yes.
Mr. Sorensen?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Do we have a reason for a closed session tonight? Okay, very good. I think it would be good, there's been a couple that have raised some questions in relationship to the PID. So I thought it would be good, I talked to Craig and Mike and maybe ask a few questions of Troy and John in relationship to legalities, and then maybe the course of action, the sequential courses of action that have been taking place, and then what your response and kind of direction has been back to the people that are involved in the application. Is that fair?
Sure.
Didn't mean to catch you off guard there, Troy, sorry.
That's okay, we'll take our best shot. I don't have the policy in front of me, and so right off the bat, I can't remember the name of the internal committee that's part of it, but an application has been made for a PID. A PID application has been filed under the policy that you approved several months ago. It is for the lakeside development. We met once as a committee. We've now met twice, but we met initially as a committee to look at their application, and the generalized process is they do a high-level application. Based on that high-level application, we make a review of that as an internal committee. If we find that it's generally in line with the council's direction by policy, we can authorize the parties to then work towards creating a joint set of agreements on how the public infrastructure district would function, which would then come to the city council for approval or not. There's several places in bold in the policy that each of these steps does not kind of grant authority for the PID approval, that final determination rests with the mayor, with the city council, not with the mayor. After we reviewed it the first time as staff, we had several questions about the application, primarily of which the size of the district ask had grown considerably, by like 500%, and that it was mostly facing the residential component and also had a tax levy issue and did not have a moderate income housing component to it. So we said, hey, we'd really appreciate some additional information to come back to help us understand your reasoning behind asking for stuff that the approved policy from the council says it is unlikely that we'll approve a PID that doesn't contain these elements. There was a response. They provided for that, and then a little bit of additional information as well. So we have about 12 or 15 pages of the initial submission and supplemental information to work from. We did meet as a committee yesterday, but Mr. Riddle was out of town and Mr. Stapley wasn't present because actually we forgot to put him on the invite list. So two of the committee members were not present. We were planning to meet later this week. We had heard the developers had talked to council members and felt that we'd at least have a council meeting in between in case there were any additional either work session or information the council wanted before the staff rendered a decision back to the developer on their initial application.
So explain to us the 500% increase in the ask. What are you talking in terms of money or in terms of area or?
Money, yeah. So right now, the paperwork that's been submitted, again, I don't have it in front of me, but it's just short of $50 million they would like to borrow now. When we were originally talking about it with the developer, it was about 10 million.
Is that because the scope increased or just because of pricing or?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, I assume it's based upon what. To be honest, I don't know. It doesn't say.
Yeah, I don't know what their initial was versus what it is now, but I mean, we would vet that out before we would approve it anyway, though, right? I mean, what it was for. It's not like we're like, oh, hey, you want 50 mil? Here you go. I mean, we'd say it's this for this, correct or not?
Yeah, and they do have a chart in there of some basics, kind of this infrastructure and that infrastructure, and that's the potential next step, right? Is that if the initial concept is okay, then the committee by policy can authorize the quite expensive creation of the paperwork. As you recall, it had a $10,000 application fee, and it was a work against fee, if you will. In other words, it may be more or less than that amount. It's just whatever the actual costs incurred by the city are. So that's been filed, and given, I think that's going to be a low number. In other words, I think once both sides engage council and experts and finance people to do it, it's likely to be more expensive. But if it's a $50 million transaction, you would expect that kind of thing. So that's, again, we have to meet and come to a final decision. We've taken no votes as a committee, unless you want to say the first time around we just concluded that, hey, we needed more information to make a decision. And so we'll have to gather and work through the material and make our own decision with regard to it. But the next step would be the much more dig into it part of it.
What's the risk to the city in this?
That depends on who you ask. And in complete fairness, the developers are not one of the ones that are being asked on that. In other words, they've been excellent at bringing in neutral experts, if you will, to address that. We've spoken with both the law firm and the financial firm that have represented that they were the ones that were engaged and kind of wrote the statute, if you will, as part of it. Their answer is that the risk is really negligible to the city with regard to PIDs. That's not been the case nationwide as this tool has been implemented. Their comeback to that, there being these neutral third-party experts, is we took care of those issues in the Utah bill. What you hear from the city management committee community is these is a very new tool. There are some more established tools available in cities' tool chests, primarily for residential development. And so there is risk in the unknown. Like, we don't know what could go bad because there literally have been none of them that have reached the finish line in the state of Utah. There are some that are far ahead of us, some that have been funded, some fairly close. The closest is in the area that NORDA, a school of whatever it is, the NORDA school that you can see on that south exit in Provo on their golf course. There's a PID associated with that development. And there's also one moving in Payson. So there are some around. Some have some dollars in them. The one in Provo it's been interesting. I haven't heard anything about liabilities, but the money hasn't worked out the way everybody thought at the beginning, is what I'm hearing. That doesn't mean it's bad or good. It's not happening exactly the way everybody anticipated. So city management is kind of saying, man, we'd like to see some of these reach finish to be more confident in the fact that there's just no exposure to the city.
What kind of problems have there been in other places?
Yeah, I'm not very conversant in that, so I'd have to go study it. I do think one of the things that we're seeing and one of the concerns that's been raised and we're seeing in the paperwork is, and if you recall from our work sessions, particularly if you're adding a mill levy, traditionally in other places in the country, these are being used, and the way they're being sold is the developments are providing something more than base zoning. In this case with Lakeside, you can argue they're doing that, but in this particular case, the whole zoning scheme has been adopted and is in place. And so now we'll have situations where literally you'll have one house that meets all the zoning on this side of the street and another one on the other next side of the street that are identical in nature with the identical amenities, with the identical everything, but this side will have a PID in place with a higher mill levy, a higher tax rate for the exact same house.
But isn't that whole area in the PID?
I
mean, the whole Lakeside Landing
It is not.
is not?
It is not. Now, all of the areas, if I understand their mapping correctly, and that's actually what we're meeting on later this week, all of the areas under control of Lakeside Land Partners and, what's the other one? That's the, I know, but what's the U?
Unify.
Yeah, like
Ed.
Unified Building. So the two main partners that you worked with through this whole process, all of their properties are in there, but there are some acreage under development already that are not, and other acreage down there interspersed throughout that are also not part of the PID request.
I'm trying to comprehend the philosophical reasoning behind this, that the PID guarantees or says that only the people living there will be the ones paying the mill levy and paying this back. Not the city, not the rest of us, just the ones that are in there. Is that right? That's what they're telling us, isn't it?
That's correct. The reason I'm hesitating a little bit is that's actually part of the negotiations, because the policy and really the direction the council gave the developers when they were here for multiple work sessions was a strong preference towards utilizing the repayment of impact fees as the funding source for the repayment of the bond. And so under that scenario, I think there's a good argument that it's actually developers themselves, in essence, or a builder repaying it. So there's a strong interest at the council side, as I understood it, to not have a mill levy. And as a result of that, there's a good faith argument that is being paid as part of the development costs, and the costs from that were captured inside the cost of the home, as opposed to the cost of the home plus a payment on top of that. And the information we're getting back, in fact, the latest information we received is a request for us to consider allowing the homeowners to incorporate the PID payment into their mortgage, which is an indication to me that simply that's an increase in the cost of the home. Now, I'm certain the developers will argue they'll be able to sell their homes cheaper than their neighbor, and the PID cost will go in. But that's one, again, of the city management concerns and the state concerns, is we're trying to get housing pricing down. And I'm not seeing that path yet. I think they'll also argue tax-free financing will be at a lower interest rate, and that will also help. But there's just so many unknowns in all this.
That's where my mind is now, because you're kind of telling us to have a little feel for it. But I don't understand how your scenario, on one side of the street they don't have it, the other side of the street they do. The other side of the street is somehow going to be able to survive and make it. I don't understand for 1 second why we would cater to this when they can just build it into the cost up front. I don't.
But that doesn't make any sense that one would, because the reason they need it is so they can get the utilities out there, because they don't exist now. So I don't understand how one side of the street would be different than the other when there's no utilities out there, period, and somebody has to pay for them to go out there.
And that's a fair question and a good one. The original conversations we were having was the PID portion of it would be limited to the off-site improvements.
That's kind of what I thought, too.
What's come in now has about $30 million of on-site improvements.
For different developers? Because, I mean, it has to be for the group, in my opinion. It has to be
just for the two developers?
If so, then that's different than what I understand it. Because I personally support it so that the community can be launched. Right? Because it doesn't make sense to pull a 6-inch sewer line across the freeway, right? I mean, that's
exactly.
But in theory, that's all they have to pay for if it's just their people. Who pays for the extra, 20-inch sewer line?
Exactly. And so we've engaged at the staff level at some additional thought on this. And I actually have a meeting with Representative White on Monday after sharing some concepts we've come up with internally with the league, who asked that we share them specifically with Representative White, because as you'll recall, he's the co-chair of the Commission on Housing Affordability. And they're exploring infrastructure and how to launch. And so one of the big discussions on the Commission on Housing Affordability, and I'm going to forget the parent, the Office of Economic Opportunity, I think, so the CHA reports to this Economic Opportunity Commission, and then they bring their ideas and suggestions to the legislature for legislation next year. So infrastructure is one of those discussions. I know the city manager has talked with Senator McKell on some of those lines actually just last week, and Bruce and Patrick were in attendance for that conversation. I'm meeting with Representative White on Monday about that. But there's also concurrent discussions primarily from the development community. And you recall very late in the session last year, a LID came up, and I'm not going to remember what LID stands for, but it's a new version of DID, which is kind of of a PID, excuse me. So a PID is going to become a LID, and the only difference effectively between the PID and the LID is the developers do not have to talk to the city council to do exactly what's happening in a PID. Right. And so everybody's trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of pressure on all sides with regard to this, because we're still trying to build houses, everyone. We're still trying to make them affordable, and we're still trying to figure out how to make them launch, and kind of which one of all of these concepts and ideas is going to end up being what actually gets used. And I feel, I had some discussions with the mayor on this, but to me, this is purely my opinion and speculation from watching the market closely. The lending market on extremely large scale loans has changed because they're looked at nationally, and everything's kind of tied up and locked up nationally. And so there's a real question of funding out there, and we're seeing it all over. We have a whole bunch of developments ready to go. And it's the funding often, at least that I'm hearing from the developers that are doing that. So they're trying to figure out how to get over the hump to launch. In this particular case, the offsite infrastructure, by their calculations, is about $19 million. So that's the offsite bring, but the ask is still closer to 50.
And I think we would review that, because I think is the way it's been explained to me is it's primarily so that the thing can launch. I mean, obviously developers are used to, if they're going to develop a piece of property, like, oh yeah, I got to bring my utilities to where the utilities are, which are the on-sites.
Yeah. And if I can recall,
offsite.
It seems to me they were bringing $30 million of outside dollars in the chart that was prepared. So it seems to me they've got $30 million in either cash or other financing, and they're needing this additional funding to get there.
Having worked with developers, I haven't met one that hasn't thought through the financing side long before they ever get approval.
Yep.
So this is just a method by which they can.
So there's two things to affordability, which I think mayors going on. I mean, if they can reduce their costs and increase their profits, great. But if they can reduce their costs, which reduces the price of the house, then that's called affordable housing. But we have to decide, are they reducing their costs so they can make more money, or are they reducing their costs so they can sell less expensive houses, or a combination thereof?
No,
I was just going to say the market determines the price of a house.
Yeah, but the one difference there, I mean, the idea I'd like to talk through with Representative White is the state has often and continues to offer low-cost loans for cities to do some infrastructure, and really the just minor slight changes is hey state, you should give us that money for free, not with a set payback. Put the state as a partner with us in this, and you put your money at risk to launching these. If you want cheaper houses and you want more houses, if you put your money at risk, we can collect back through impact fees or directly through the developer. There are a lot of ways to solve this problem. But if it launches and absorbs in 3 years or 5 years, that will impact how much money you get back. And you may earn less on this transaction than you would in the PTIF or something like that. But to me, that would, in essence, it would take out at least the question that the developers are padding their profits or even just getting
Right.
their profits, because that 19 million is taken off the table. And we know what those costs are. And hopefully it would help the homeowners then, because it's a set cost at a beneficial interest rate or no interest rate. The state legislature could give us the ability to put whatever that transaction is straight into the impact fees, and everybody's off and running. They would have a financing source. We'd be able to bond on it. State would give us the money. The state would know how much money they're getting back, just not when. And it seems like everybody wins.
So, but it would be funded through impact fees, so you'd have an increased impact fee when you built out there?
No, because the important key right now is that the 19 million we're talking about of offsite infrastructure, those are already incorporated in our impact fees. So those impact fees will come to the city and will be available to repay, in this case right now, the developer, but they don't know when they're getting the money.
Correct.
And so a lender is not going to be very excited about, I'm not sure when I get my money back based upon absorption. And I'm saying, hey, state, you got plenty of money. You're funding tons of money to incentivize this. Put a basket of money together, and it can be revolving. Every time impact fees come in, you have another couple $1 million to ship right back out and accelerate the infrastructure. And we have plenty of examples. The biggest example the city has on why is the city not excited about doing this? Well, we did it on our wastewater treatment plant. We did it right in 2008. Great timing. We spent $10 million, expanded our wastewater treatment plant. What happened? All buildings stopped, right? And our wastewater impact fee fund has been as far as almost $10 million in the negative, because we're still waiting for that development to catch up with the decision made back then to invest in a plant which needs big dollar investments. Well, to us, $10 million is a year and a half of sewer revenues. To the state, $10 million is like a rounding error, right? So if their ability to put 100 or 200 million into this to help cities that just can't afford a $10 million hit to our budget for the next 6 or 7 or 8 years seems like a pretty easy
But
step.
it still has the city in the middle of it, where the way some of the PIDs are explained to me is that we're not administrating it. We just basically said, hey, it's okay to go ahead and do that, similar to,
True, and they'll say
because
experts.
I don't want to have to administer it, which impact fees we have to administer.
Correct. And the experts will do that. So here, you asked for some stories. Here are 2 stories from Springville, not involving PIDs, but involving special improvement districts, which are we have way more than 2 of them in the past. And in a couple of circumstances with regard to it, you have the experts that go out there that are supposed to track all of this. And on the SID west of the freeway, the experts were tracking it, but we ended up missing a whole bunch of closings on the property. In other words, people would sell a house or a lot, and nobody would collect it because the title company missed it on the title search because it's actually on the subdivision. And without going down a rabbit hole of confusion, we've had the experts do it and they've missed it. And you have to come back to the council and be like, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars of uncollected SID. Who's going to pay for this? And it's a real challenge. We had another bond in place, and I can't remember if this is SID or not, but happening just in the last few years, where said expert paid money that was supposed to come to Springville City to the IRS. Well, how easy is it to get money back from the IRS? Not very easy. The state of Utah came calling and said, we want our $40,000 or so. And we said, the IRS has it. And they said, too bad, send it to us. So right now today, we have $40,000 that have gone to the state, and we're chasing $40,000 plus with the IRS to get it back. Now, will the city get it back? Probably. We probably will, but we're chasing what the experts screwed up. And so on the PIDs, that's where those of us that have done this for a long time in similar circumstances said, yeah, you have professional people and they should act professionally, but they make mistakes too. And those mistakes can cost the city a lot of money.
But depending on the type of PID that it is, we wouldn't be administrating it at all, right?
Yeah, well, so
If it's
on-
a property tax, for sure we wouldn't. That'd be a nightmare.
well, so the act allows the city to retain and pay for through PID funds lawyers and accountants that will manage the books. And I'm simply saying we've done that several times, and they've made mistakes, and the city has incurred the losses associated with those mistakes. So they're touting that as a positive. It is that I don't have to assign Bruce to do all that accounting, but I have to assign somebody to do it, and they're outside people, because it is still a quasi-governmental, it is a governmental organization with regard to it. Now, again, they're saying that's sitting over there in the PID, and if they screw up, the PID's got to figure it out. But all of you have been here long enough to know that if there's a problem in a PID out there and it's impacting a couple hundred homeowners, that the first people they're going to call are sitting right here, not an accountant that's in Salt Lake somewhere to solve their problem.
It hadn't occurred to me before, but this $50 million, just in the long shot chance that it ever happened, would that be on our debt as a city, and would that affect our bond rating and all those other scenarios that go with that?
The answer from the experts to that is no.
Yeah, baloney.
Thank you.
Well, that's all contractual. If it is, it is, and if it isn't, it isn't.
that's-
So
Yeah.
you can't say,
Yeah,
you know, if that's what they say and that's the way it's written, and that's the way
that's
it
the way
is.
it is.
We're collecting it. Who else would?
We're not collecting
Yeah,
it.
We're not,
independent.
we're not collecting
We're
it.
not collecting it.
We could if we, depending on how we frame it.
Right. Yeah. So the tax levy would go, I mean, right now, there's tax levies, for example, associated with the Springville Irrigation District that's on the west side, that those of us on the east side are not paying. And you pay that tax on your tax bill, and that money goes to them. The PID, in theory, would work the same way, that the money collected through the taxing process would go to the PID, and then those experts in the district would utilize those dollars and send those to the bond.
Okay, but so Zions Bank comes up and buys this bond for $50 million. Who are they going to assign that bond to? The PID or to Springville City?
Yeah, that's where it gets fuzzy. I mean, it's assigned to the PID, but it's written in such a way that they're utilizing Springville City as the backstop. I mean, there's no other way around that.
That wasn't what
that's
they explained.
speculation.
us.
I think that's
So
speculation.
The way they explained it to us was that they have no recourse to the city. And I've talked to Zion's debt people who say
Right.
there is no recourse
They're
to the
the
city.
ones that-
What they did say, what Zion's did say, is they said, look, if the one way this, because I asked them, I said, is there any way this could hurt Springville if we were to do a PID? And they said, with the way they're being written now, the only thing it would do is it would be like reputational damage. If something went wrong in the end, I would be less likely to go to Springville to fund bonds in the future,
Yeah,
just because they'd had that bad incident.
thank you. I mean,
But nothing direct, nothing, the city wouldn't be implicated, no credit rating implications. It wouldn't be against our credit. It would be simply an independent agency that would be taking on
Correct.
that bond. And
Yeah,
funding it,
using the
trying to
word
get it done.
backstop is wrong in the financial term. Yeah, you're exactly right from the way you explained it, and much the way the municipal building authority works, right? You have municipal building authority with its only asset is this building here. Is Zions Bank really gonna come foreclose on
Right.
this building, and what are they gonna gain from it, right? So it's all reputational, much like we're seeing with the country right now, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, the country's gonna pay its debts. And that's the assumption that's out there. You're exactly right and well said.
Hopefully this has been helpful. I've been
Well, but I
lightning
just want
to
to know what the next step is. I mean, obviously you're going to meet with them, but I mean, the way I look at it is if it's going to be done and done right, and actually done economically the best way, rather than patchwork, this presents a solution that is not obviously meant for every development everywhere. I can only see maybe one or two in our entire city that's something like this would work for.
Well, let me just give you my personal opinion. I'm not sure where you'd stop, because these will be requested by everybody, because I can tell you the tax exempt rate is going to be better, so everybody's going to be wanting to do it. The thing that bothers me, I think most of all, and it happens periodically, and it's a philosophical thing. I just detest somebody who goes around once a council decision's made and go out and petition councilmen to reconsider something on a one-on-one basis. I think that's a very cheap way to have conversation. I think that's a very cheap way to solve a problem, and that's what they've done. So, I don't have a vote here, but I think the council was pretty direct on what they wanted to do, and that's where I would have it lay. The issue really gets down to what are they doing it for, and I think we're pretty naive to think that they wouldn't do it to increase their profit. Now they may say they're not going to and all that sort of stuff, but I mean that's what free enterprise is, and their objective is to maximize their dollars as best they possibly can, and this is certainly one way to do it. The incremental difference on $50 million bond as opposed to a $10 million bond is 5 times. And you just have to be thinking about what precedents you're setting for this as well as anything else. So, enough said. Okay. I think your next step is a conversation with them, and
It's actually not a conversation yet. Our next step is to meet as a committee and determine whether or not they've met the standard to now kind of both sides start expending significant dollars towards creating the formal structure of creating this governmental agency and working towards what the rules are around the PID. So we'll be meeting as that committee and giving them that feedback of go forward or not. Obviously, the next steps then differ pretty radically depending on the outcome of the committee's decision. The committee could say we're not moving forward, and that would end the process, which I'm certain would result in more telephone calls. And then there's obviously the full other side and everything in between, the other side being we like what we're seeing, let's move forward to creation of documents.
So my question is how bad do we want Lakeside Landing? I mean, do we want to have more than 100 building permits a year? Do we want that community or not? And I'm okay if the answer is no. Let's just let it go. But if we really want to have some building in our city, then I think we have to help these people.
I don't think that's the position of a city.
Well, we spent all that time.
Who are you going to say?
designing a
Who are
city.
you going to say no to, and who are you going to say yes to? If
I think this is a very unique ask.
every
it's a-
developer is going to come to you. Why? Because
Not
the
every
increment-
developer needs to go underneath the freeway with sewer lines. I think 1600 South may have the need for this as well, but
the PID is applicable to any development.
but only with approval. I mean, it's not like you're like, oh, hey, yeah, you can have that. I mean, I think there has to be stipulations of when you would and when you wouldn't.
That's what I'm saying. Is you're on a slippery slope. So, but anyway,
Well, okay, sorry, my wonder is if not a PID, then how do we get some building going on in our city, if that's what we would like, is to, like Craig said, have some building permits? Because I see other adjacent cities, and for some reason, they are building, and just, is there another mechanism? Is there something that, if that is what we want to do, is to bring more people to our city?
Yeah, actually, for the most recent numbers we've looked at in the last year, Springville saw an 80% decrease in residential building, and so did Utah County for everyone else. So we saw robust commercial development, and everybody else still seeing pretty good commercial development last year. So for me, kind of globally, the residential market's kind of seized up a little bit. So the question, I think,
It depends
very
on
valid.
what part of Utah County. I would agree in some areas, but if you look at Mapleton, Santaquin, Spanish Fork, Payson,
Yeah,
their
well,
building permit numbers are up.
No, they're not. They're all down close to 80%.
Okay, I'll do my math, but
Yeah.
Home Builders Association says different. I'll
They
see.
have permits out there, but they're down from year over year, is what I'm saying.
the thing you need is lower mortgage rates.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to repeat what I said in work session. It's that same 30-year-old view. 30 years ago, we approved the first subdivision on the other side of the tracks, and now there's almost built out to at least to 12th, and going towards the freeway. 30 years from now is not that long. It seems like it on the beginning side of it, but if they don't develop now, 30 years from now, there'll be houses over there, whether we pay their way or they pay their own way.
It's just how soon do you want it?
I'm in no hurry.
If we're not in a hurry,
I'm
And let's
not.
make that decision and say, well, we spent a lot of time talking about a community that won't exist for maybe 30 years. And that's okay. Because I remember 4 years ago when Liz came in, we wanted green. We wanted green on the other side of the freeway. And that's not a horrible choice, I guess. I mean, it's not the choice that I thought we had made a little bit ago, but if that's what we want to do is not, granted, to Chris's point, eventually it will. We can help it or we can not help it.
Yeah, I mean, you're zoning south of 16 South today as agricultural.
Yeah.
Right? And you're looking at a plan that potentially changes that. But that's a
And,
choice.
and that plan that we looked at in work session is great, but guess what? It's just a picture on a piece of paper that costs a lot of money to put the infrastructure in that makes that work. And there's not. You look at even Saratoga Springs. There were developers that came all together and said, "Okay, we're going to make this city." Right? I mean, the one that we look at all the time in South Jordan. That was one guy that came together and put a lot of money together. We don't have that going here.
I mean, the direct answer to your question with regard to this is that on the impact fee side of things, the Utah League of Cities and Towns has recommended for some time that you do your plan and then you go bond for those improvements and put them in. Right. I mean, so you bond for them and put them in, which will stimulate the growth because you'll have kind of pad ready, if you will, sites. Now, our city's experience was negative when we tried that approach. You could argue, say, a Pleasant Grove with, what's the name of the big road they put through that has a lot of development on it now? But they put,
Boulevard.
they put $10+ million into that, and they built a road, and suddenly there was a lot of development happening. We've talked about that on.
What St. George City's done.
Yeah, yeah.
Put all
exactly.
those roads in, and boom,
Exactly.
there it
And
comes.
so,
the city.
so that's really, I mean, the answer to the question from some of the few tools we have would be to pick selected areas within the city and get the infrastructure in. It doesn't always have to be bonding, but for most of our improvements, we have some that have some money in the impact fee fund. I mean, we could potentially, we budgeted $2 million this year, for example, to put 26 West in to stimulate the development because we were told this summer they would be doing it, and we promised $2 million next year. So we put $4 million in essence on the table to stimulate development in Lakeside. Now, they need 19, not 4. Certainly water and sewer don't have the ability to move forward with that kind of funding without bonding. So that's really kind of the question if you want to do it. On the sewer side, the projects they need in are impact fee project number 1 and number 2. So they will be the next ones we do. And in a traditional historic sense, the developer will say, well, when are you doing the sewer line? That's our next one. It's scheduled for fiscal 27, and they can decide whether to accelerate it or wait. The challenge with the scope of Lakeside is that, well, it's 1 and 2 of sewer this way, and 8 and 9 of secondary water this way, and 2 and 4 of stormwater going the other direction. And so it's 19 million coming from every which way, and that's hard. We understand that.
So the conversation that your committee is gonna have with the developer is gonna be based on what we already talked about in our work sessions with the PID. The limits that we set, you're gonna be working with the developer based on those conversations, correct?
We will be reading the policy you adopted, looking at the submission in accordance with the policy, and saying, does this meet it or not? Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Troy. Appreciate that.
It was a delight.
That was. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. Appreciate you coming.